Welcome to Millie Salmon and the Book of Habits. This is Chapter 3, Stocking. In this episode, Millie finds that regular attendance at work has its benefits. Warm, woolen benefits. I'm the author, Ray Dubicki. I'm very happy to be reading Millie's adventures for you. You can join Millie Salmon on Patreon or find more at milliesalmon.com. You can follow this podcast and more on social media at Infinite Shop Limited. Chapter 3, Stocking. Employees of Second Story Books will not actually have to do any stocking because the persistence engine takes care of a lot of that. We accept sales by customers, no consignment, unless that is a homeworld preferred method, as noted in the Book of Habits. However, you will be asked to help move tables and shelves around because we like to do that, and it keeps the persistence engine on its toes. Millie had her drawing book open on the shop counter. Slow afternoon, little jobs done, she alternated between reading and drawing. This felt like a drawing day. On the page was sketched everything she could see, namely, the shop. She liked drawing the rows of books and magazines, and found she liked it even more when she hid little messages in the spines and covers. A little play on words here to replace a title, a little caricature of a comic character on a popular magazine. She didn't draw in any pictures of her friends because that felt too much like teasing. She finished writing in a couple silly titles, playing word games by starting the next with the end of the last. Long afternoon in the garden. Garden parties and brunches. Brunches and bunches. Bunches of love signed. She didn't know who to sign it with, so she made up the name Butters McPhee, and that put an end to the series. Done with this edition of her Pictures from the Shop series, she flipped the page. As she took the paper around the back of its spiral binding, the edge of it caught the light and a line in the row of shelves and the border in a tile floor, and they all crinkled. One of those weird tricks of eyeballs where the lines that get close enough together start to squish. Millie's brain started pulling the lines apart. On the new page, she drew the outline of the walls of the store as it was currently composed. She knew perfectly well these walls could move, and the whole room could open into a space that could comfortably fit over 100 people for dinner. She had seen it, and suddenly felt herself looking forward to the next Brentone, when it would happen again. But for now, the entry room, with its dozen long shelves, was just an elongated rectangle. Through an open double door to the right, there was a series of progressively smaller rooms that went from 5 to 3 to 1 bookshelf in each. To the left, a pair of doors went to rooms, one with music, one with comics. Combined, the shop looked like it had been carved out of the first floor of 3 townhouses. It was a compelling image that was produced by the persistence engine and completely malleable. Millie drew it anyway, from the top down, including a detailed pattern of the mismatched tile floor. The heart of the shop, that elusive and temperamental persistence engine, could produce a lot. It had barreled the shop into a building that it didn't belong, opening a random door on the side of a downtown tower. She had actually compelled it to do the same in Captain Listing's palace on another planet. From those big things of moving the shop to the tiny wonders, the persistence engine produced. Like how it generates all these books and lightly rearranges them for each planet from wherever a customer enters. Millie had seen hundreds of small notes flip open across the floor, up all the shelves, even onto the ceiling. Those seemed like tags and posts, created just like the persistence engine creates paper. It made Millie wonder if the floor was just a floor. Dad referred to it as one of the persistence engine's main tasks, as maintaining the shop floor. But he talked about it like it was a conveyor belt of twisted space, a rubber mat that could bend and fold without the people walking on it noticing. The space it occupied was weird, but Dad mentioned nothing about there being significance beyond that. It was just a regular floor that happened to occupy some ripple in the universe that let it carry all the books ever written. Also, dances and potlucks. She looked sideways at the drawing of the floor tiles for a moment. The patterns on the floor were something else. She blurred her eyes a little. She leaned back and rocked forward. There was a word for it they learned. Epitovia perceptiva perspiration, something with a P, she was sure. She looked at the dictionary under the counter, then grabbed her phone. Pareidolia, tendency to see patterns. Miss Blitz talked about it in science last year. The mind wants to make a face out of things. Put 2 dots and a line on anything, a house, a rock, a lima bean, and it looks like a face. Something wired deep inside infants to draw their attention to nurturing humans. They were supposed to talk about energy, but ended up spending the day watching videos about it. But the floor didn't look like a face, most of it. There were a couple dot line patterns here and there. It was so many different floors, kind of mashed together. The different colors were very evident, and yet Millie felt like some sort of connection between them, something that understood the whole floor as something beyond a 12-dimensional non-Euclidean manifold of space-time that people walked on. "Grandpa, who laid out the floor?" Millie finally asked. That's an interesting question. I guess it just developed. Had to replace some wires and that stripe formed." He pointed at a jagged line of green tiles among the blues. Then Grandpa showed a handful of light gray tiles between rows of darker grays. "And that is supposed to be 2 adjoining rooms. So we put a little mismatched tile between them to pretend a little, make it look like it was accidental. There have been replacements here and there over the years." "And the carpet?" "Oh, there used to be more. It's not comfortable for anyone when a customer comes in from an ocean world." The thought derailed Millie's focus on the floor. There are ocean worlds? We connect to them? How do they read paper books? How do they breathe? "A lot of effort on the persistence engine's part. I'll point it out next time someone comes in from Bierno or Ithipolis." "Can we go in those underwater cities?" Millie was thinking about a particular squirrel in a diving suit and a tree dome. "Of course, lovely cities to visit too. Excellent barbecue in Bierno." Millie felt the train of this conversation absolutely lifting off the tracks and taking flight. But she couldn't leave one more question unanswered. How do you smoke meat in an underwater city? "Very carefully," Grandpa said, flexing his alpha dad pun muscles. "Really volcanic vents. We have to be careful to get the low sulfur plankton spears." Another mental image of animated sea creatures roasting over a bubbling hot volcano vent. Grandpa saw Millie fighting inside, wanting to understand more about how things would work in Bierno, while still wanting to get back to what she was asking questions about. Grandpa felt a little bad about letting the conversation get away from Millie, so he told a little story. You know, Quibby, sometimes it's like the Stufo bakers of Nolit Beta. Every day they come into their small shops, thousands of them, in little Stufo stores all over the planet. They wake up early and go in and get the Stufo made. Then they turn around and outside the same shop, they unwind a big awning and sell the Stufo to folks around. Like clockwork, until the whole planet has its Stufo, and they wrap up their shops and go home for an evening of public theater. Every night, a new play put on by the town's citizens, including the Stufo bakers. Millie felt the expression on her face, and it resembled a carved pumpkin. A little teethy, a little wide-eyed, and all the fire of a single candle behind the blank expression. In a light voice, she said, I just asked about the tiles. Exactly, Grandpa exclaimed, suddenly enough to make Millie jump. And now your thinking is back to where you started. What are you finding interesting about the tiles? Millie shook the sudden and all-encompassing fog out of her brain. What's the pattern of the tiles? Grandpa thought for a second, looked at the floor of the shop, and saw it freshly for the first time in a long while. I don't know that there is a pattern. All I can see are the wear and tear. Also, this promotions table is askew. He walked over to the smaller table in the center of the main room. Grandpa pulled up the corner and pulled the table leg into the corner of a gray tile. He inched it a little further to make it the exact corner. Better, Grandpa announced, brushing the non-existent dust off his hands. Millie felt a little ripple through the shop as the persistence engine adjusted to this slightly new arrangement. Apparently, it noticed that Grandpa's display table now faced the nearby shelves slightly differently. A few of the book titles changed on the shelves, arranged in a way that the persistence engine observed to be slightly more efficient. Grandpa did not find that to be an adequate reaction to his change in the furniture. That's not enough, Crystal. You can do better than that, he said into the air. He took the entire table and pulled it a full tile over, again adjusting the feet into the precise corners of their respective tiles. The books around on the shelves started changing again. Grandpa's game was beginning. Okay, now to get ahead of you, he said. He took a stack of books, put them on a box of comics, and began moving around the room, grinning. Millie closed her drawing book and came from behind the counter to help Grandpa rearrange the main room of the shop. They made a game of lasties firsties. Cooking and dining led to diners and restaurants, which led directly to hitchhiker and tourist guides. The afternoon was full. Quibby, I think you're forgetting something. Thursday's workday was wrapping up, and Millie had said goodnight to Grandpa. She was headed towards the door, and a quiet afternoon of reading in a sunbeam under a tree at the park. The boys had their own projects this afternoon. Pats was learning how to referee youth basketball. Reggie elusively said he had an appointment with a supplier. Millie was 99% sure he was bulk ordering shipments of shoestrings and mulch to control the supply in the local market. Millie gave herself a pat down. Bag, water bottle, drawing book, keys. I think I have everything. Grandpa pulled an envelope off the shelf. It was a long, official envelope with a little window for the recipient's address. Doubly official. There was even a printed address in the upper left that said Second Story Books. Super official. "What's this?" Millie asked. "It's payday," said Grandpa. I thought I was getting paid in the universal currency of knowledge." Millie half-quoted the routine answer Dad gave her for not getting a new laptop. "That's your father's excuse for not paying you. I'm your grandfather, and I get to show him how to do it correctly." Grandpa smiled at Millie. "He's also forgotten what it's like to have the freedom of money in your pocket." Millie opened the envelope and looked at the printed check inside. It said $960. "Holy shit," Millie said aloud. "Is that not enough?" Grandpa asked. Millie didn't know how to answer. She had a $500 check in her hands once before when she had to take it into school to pay for a fundraiser. Dad double-checked it was in her folder and her backpack was on tight before sending her out the door. His stress translated directly to her anxiety. Since then, money had come in one or two $20 bills or a transfer of $25 onto her phone to electronically pay for soda and popcorn when they went to a baseball game. This was a lot of money. At the same time, there was a confusing voice in Millie's head that said she was now negotiating. Was this like the bluff games that she played with Reggie and Pat's? If she said it was too much, would Grandpa give her less next time? All her future earnings hung on her reaction right now. Grandpa saw the confusion and tension run back and forth across Millie's face, like cats chasing each other around the living room. "Quibby, Quibby, Millie." That got her attention. He put a hand on her forearm. "You earned this money. 3 weeks, 16 hours each. You showed up and had a great attitude. You deserve $30 an hour." He pointed at the paperwork in the envelope. "And we strictly adhere to all local laws so that $30 turns into $20 for you after taxes, insurance, and assorted employment fees." He paused. "Also, you're now part of the Bookbinders, Booksellers, and Bookies Union on Pelona, Local 929. Millie had a question she didn't know how to ask. She thought of Firth, how he had worked in the shop as acolyte before her, but never talked about it as work or money. Is this because... She pointed between the two of them, then up to their apartment. Well, where their apartment would be if the shop was actually inside the same building, not tethered to just the door and floating in space between worlds. Millie got out a couple words of a question. Is this because me, Mom, Dad, you're my grandpa? This was a very fair question, and Grandpa appreciated how hard it was for Millie to ask. Grandpa thought about some of the rolling disagreements him and Jules maintained about Millie's exposure to the shop. His granddaughter should know a lot more about their history, her family, and money at this age. Her father, his son, had stopped a lot of that. Grandpa saw Jules' anxiety on Millie's face. No. All acolytes get paid a fair wage. You are not making as much as Firth right now. He worked here for 3 years. This is what he started with and earned more by the end of his time as acolyte. So this is all mine. I don't owe folks any part of this. Beyond the grip of Grulong. Grandpa paused for a second. Grulong was a 9th century tax collector from Untautau who enjoyed his job a little too much. He built the city's sewer system, and they flushed him down it. Millie half absorbed the story, half thinking about cash. She decided this was not actually a negotiation or a lesson story. Thank you, Grandpa. I think this will work amazingly. Good, Grandpa said. You really are doing good work, Quibby. Do you have your bank card to deposit that check? She had her bank card with her bus pass, student ID, and library card in a wallet in her bag. But she didn't need it. She had her bank account memorized since the first time she saw it when her mom went to open her youth savings checking account on her 8th birthday. She was so pleased with the number, it just stuck in her head. 22428216. It was multiples. I can make the deposit. Thanks, Grandpa. Good night. Stepping out of the shop, Millie almost tripped, making a rough calculation. A weekly $360 for 10 weeks of summer, she would clear $3,600. No, one of those weeks was camp. She'd be at $3,240. She could buy a car. What do cars cost? She would have to think about driver's ed. How much did driver's ed cost? She had 2 more years. She could work for 3 summers and have close to $100,000. No, that's not right. 3 times 3,000 and change is $10,000. Move the comma. Her math wasn't mathing. This gold mine she was sitting on was making her brain not work quite good. She made a direct line to the bank. This was not the busy bank tower where Mom worked on Dalabrator. It also wasn't the buzzing lobby where she visited Homie with Dad on Harlquat. The local branch bank was just a lot of screens and no people. She had not actually been inside the bank here on Earth since they opened her account. It was busy that day. There had been a pandemic since then, so nothing in the bank had people anymore. Guess it was good Millie had her bank card. She took her card and check to the money machine. There was a pen, and she endorsed the back of the check, like Mom told her, and tore it off the larger page. It was a really official document, all heavy paper, and the check had little writing around the edges. She felt impressed at Grandpa's accounting. She put her card in the ATM and typed her code, 7287. Pat's. She'd never tell him, though. She deposited the check in her account. The screen switched and asked, "Do you want to make a withdrawal?" Millie felt her finger over the no button for a moment before hitting the yes. She typed the amount 2 and 0 for $20, and her finger hit the 0 again. That's what she said to herself. Hit it accidentally, that extra 0, but she didn't delete it. The machine spit out 10 bills, each $20. She folded the $200 and put it in her wallet, and sped out the door. The bank was on Hudson Street, 3 short blocks from the front of the Salmon family's apartment building. Those 3 blocks were a universe of stores, restaurants, and the spectrum of boba tea shops that Reggie had ranked from best to worst. When Millie had just her allowance in her pocket, she knew that she could get 3 days' worth of boba. Thursdays were normally not boba days because she would plan to get a treat after school with Reggie and Pat's on Friday. So normally it was easy to walk by. This Thursday, it was not easy to walk by. She was not limited to a single $20 bill in her pocket. At the ordering kiosk, her finger hit the button an extra time for more tapioca balls. And again, her normally $5 boba was suddenly $7.55. It tasted richer. She ate the cookie that also got ordered by finger hitting a button. It was a $12 trip. The stores were normally nothing Millie would pay attention to. There were dresses and coats. There were bottles and plants. There were books and pies. Her normal allowance didn't pull her inside any of these places. Now, with 10 times more money, minus the boba and cookie, Millie saw these doors start to open. Millie found herself staring in the window of the neighborhood sock shop, Hotfoot. She went in, picked out 6 pairs, and found her wallet $136.50 lighter. Then she walked home, sweating. Mom was reading on the couch, and Dad was in the kitchen, cutting veggies and tending a simmering pot of something. The house smelled like tomato and eucalyptus, which did not bode well for dinner. It was a remarkably normal afternoon, except that they didn't expect Millie to be walking in so early. She was free to use her summer afternoons to go around with the boys or read in the park, and she had been taking advantage of that freedom every day. "Hi, sweetie. How did work go?" Dad asked. It went good. We moved books." "How did the persistence engine react?"
It was fine. Grandpa was happy being one step ahead of the machine. By the end, I think everything was kind of back where it started."
"That's about right." Dad uncovered and stirred his pot. Not tomato, but tons of eucalyptus poured out. Millie's face must have signaled that she was not a koala. "It's a candle project. Ziti casserole is in the oven." Millie was relieved. Mom asked, without looking up, "Did anything fun come in envelopes?" Of course, Mom would know it's payday. She worked at a bank, several banks, come to think about it. Millie knew at least 2, one on Earth and another in Dalabertor. How many jobs does her mother actually have?
Yeah, it was great. I deposited the check."
That came out a little too quickly. Dad noticed. "You okay?"
I got you something."
Millie put the Hotfoot bag on the table.
"I saw something I liked, and you all would like too."
She felt herself projecting an excitement she didn't feel, a happiness from a hollow spot. She definitely felt excited, just excited in a way that put a lingering hole in her gut. Dad smiled and wiggled. He was experiencing that happy excitement that Millie wanted. "Wow, for us? Why? For anything in particular?"
"No, just for, I don't know, thank you."
Millie looked at the floor while she pulled out the socks. All 6 pairs of very tall, wildly patterned socks from an expensive sock boutique. The pairs for Reggie and Pat's both had dice, Reggie's in purple and brown, Pat's in blue and gold. Grandpa's socks were owls, because libraries felt like that. Dad's socks were burritos. Millie got matching pairs for herself and Mom, little Earth globes on a starry background, because they were both from Earth today. Dad's surprise at the socks was mixed with a stranger concern. He had some idea how expensive that bag of socks was, because he walked around the neighborhood every day. "Oh, how nice," he got out. "You didn't have to do that for us."
"You don't like them?" Millie snapped. "I'll take them back."
Not at all, Dad stammered. He tried to make a joke. You've given us clothing. You've given me a sock. You've freed me. Millie shot a look expressing that she was not amused at Dad acting like a house elf, so he tried something a little more direct. They're just a surprise on a random summer Thursday. Thank you, Millie. From across the room, Stony got a better view of the situation and used some powerful mom powers to guess what was wrong. She saw Millie's deflated posture, her shaking heel, her averting eyes. Millie wasn't asking if her father wanted the gifts to go back. Millie was asking some larger permission. Millie, how did things go at the bank? Mom asked. Of course, Mom wanted to know about the bank, Millie thought. That's where she lived when she wasn't here. It was fine. Card works, all money machines. That was it. Stony realized her and Jules were the first people Millie had talked to since being handed more money than she'd seen ever. How much cash did you pull out? Mom asked. It was a weird, direct question that got deep into Millie's head. I accidentally pulled out $200, she lied. Accidentally? Mom asked gently. The extra zero just appeared and I couldn't put it back. Jules was lost. He was busy being excited about new socks. He worried that he wasn't being excited enough. Stony understood Millie's knotted stomach immediately and felt the level of money stress wrapped up in it. Stony had seen it happen to Jules enough times. She chose to carefully unwind the astounding level of anxiety she felt pouring off of Millie. Millie, listen to me. Those socks are amazing. You are also very thoughtful. I want to add so much more appreciation that you used part of the first money you earned to get us presents. Millie felt Mom tiptoeing. It made Millie feel weird that Mom needed to do that. On top, Millie picked her own socks out first, then spent so much money, then the feeling she had to buy something left a fuzz in her mouth. It feels like there's a but coming, Millie said. The but is that we love the socks, Mom said. But it seems like this whole exchange is tying you up into a knot. I want to know what's going on in your head. Mom was psychic, Millie reminded herself. Am I in trouble? Jules felt he had to check the melting pot of wax and say something wise. Stony intercepted that idea and got in a much better question first. Jules, what was the first thing you bought with money you earned from a job? Stony knew the story. Jules wasn't sure why she brought it up, but he followed along anyway. I worked an entire summer specifically to buy tickets to see a band. 2 tickets. The person who I wanted to go with me said no, so me and an empty seat watched a very short concert in a very hard rain. It was awful. Did anyone suggest you spend your money on something else? Mom asked. Dad laughed a little. No, I didn't let them. I said over and over that I have this cash that I'm getting from work and I'm putting it all into these tickets. Do you regret spending your money on a terrible concert? Stony was leading her husband to the answer she wanted. Covered in mud, alone and wet, with the lead turnable of Haste to the Front, yelling back at the fans booing him, yeah, I had a lot of anger, but there was nothing else I wanted to buy as much as those tickets. So no, I don't regret them. Stony turned her attention to her daughter. Millie, are you feeling regret for buying those gifts for us? I will if they get me in trouble. You're not in trouble, Dad said. I need to hear it from Mom. You're not in trouble, Mom affirmed, but I want you to tell me what it felt like when you were picking out things from the store. What it felt like was Millie was standing in the apartment doorway for too long with her coat and bag on, running over herself with a hammer, when all she wanted to do was share some socks with her parents. She hadn't even taken her shoes off. It felt like I wasn't in the store, just like I'm not here right now. Okay, sweetie. Dad was on firmer ground now. Take a minute to enter the house and come back to the table and talk with us. He ducked down to actually catch Millie's far-off gaze. Okay, 5 minutes, and we'll meet back here. Okay. Millie exhaled, went to the routine of entering the house, and escaped to her bedroom. In her head, Millie went over the line she followed home, the line the money created in her body. From the shop, she wanted to deposit her check, the whole thing, but there wasn't anyone there. The machine asked her to withdraw, and she did. She didn't want to pull out more than $20, but it added the extra zero, and she pulled out $200. Just like Dad always told her to, she secured the money, secured hand on her wallet, and out the door of the bank. There, Millie's thinking got fuzzy. Her memory was crisp, but not recorded from inside her own head. Her hand was on her wallet, and she flipped her bag onto her front and held her money secure. It was like she could feel the money through the bag. Millie saw herself doing this. The wallet came out to buy boba and cookies. All the money was very in there. Millie saw herself deciding against the extra boba and the cookie, then saying yes anyway. Millie saw herself handing over much more money than normal. In her head, Millie's thoughts turned to the sock store. She always knew Hotfoot was there, besides having a couple ridiculous Christmas and Valentine's Day socks she got as gifts. Their windows changed every holiday and season with amazing knit stuff to show. There were character toys and construction paper chains. Their summer display was up with socks featuring hot dogs and fireworks and so many rainbows between red, white, and blue patriotism. Millie had watched herself walk in, holding her wallet inside her backpack. She felt the same way, walking back out to the dining room, almost watching herself from outside. Mom had moved to the table. Dad was still in the kitchen. Millie sat at her regular spot. Dad slid some buttered bread and a sliced apple on a plate in front of her and sat down himself. They were in important discussion positions, which spiked Millie's stress through the roof. All about buying some gifts, buying socks. Eat, hon, Dad said. I'm not hungry. It's later than you know. I think you could use a snack. I had boba, Millie said, and a cookie. Dad's eyebrows furrowed. Mom put her hand on his and took over the discussion. Softly, she said, Sounds like an adventurous afternoon. Millie wanted to say the afternoon didn't feel like anything except chewing on aluminum foil, and the grinding was getting louder. Yeah, I guess. I'm seeing that you're upset about something, and I have a guess at what it is. Do you know the saying that money is burning a hole in your pocket? Do you think that might have happened today? I know the phrase, Millie said, but it's not like that. I wanted something, I just didn't know what. We should back up a step, Mom offered.
When you think of money burning a hole in your pocket, what do you think it means? That the money is literally on fire and I got to spend it now, like it's talking to me. It really wasn't that kind of. Millie shook at the imagined energy. That's not what happened. Mom nodded, giving the idea a moment to breathe. See, I feel like it means something closer to what you're describing, a magnetic pull rather than a drop it like it's hot emergency. It's not a magnetic pull. I know how to save money, Millie retorted. She felt like they were narrowing it down too easily, that this is simply not knowing how to save money. Millie did understand, and Mom was right. It did feel like a magnet, but there was that other part, the part where she didn't feel inside herself when her fingers were making these decisions, were being made without her. She didn't know how to explain that part, and it made the other thing, the magnetic thing, so babyish. Millie's snap reply took Stoney by surprise. But not Jules. Jules knew full well that Stoney could collapse emperors to sniveling tears with a softly asked question. She had. But Stoney worked off logic, and using it to make emperors collapse into sniveling tears was easy when you didn't care about future emotional scarring of some half-wit dynastic inbred monarch. Stoney didn't want to scar Millie, not only because this was Stoney's kid, but also because Millie had not shown herself to be a despot. Jules had an idea what Millie was feeling. Millie, it causes me a ton of turmoil when I have to make a big purchase. Was the magnet pulling your body separate from you? You said in the doorway that you felt outside of yourself. Millie said, avoiding. Dad tilted his head to put himself in Millie's eye line again, since she was back to staring a hole somewhere between a fleck on the wall and the drive-through sign on the other side of town. It happens to me too. I don't like this money thing. I want us to have enough to get by in a day and not have to think about it otherwise. I punt most money stuff over to your mom. Yes, he does, Stoney said, with every bit of the universe's contempt pinning down each word. Jules glazed right by the undertones and continued, It felt like you wanted something, but all the things that go with it are just a long list of chances to screw up. What if the money dumps on the floor? What if you don't have all the stuff in your cart? What if you say something weird towards the cashier? I love talking to people, but the second money is involved, it gets weird. I did want the socks, Millie said weakly. Something just went. She waved her hands at her father. Really weird. It felt like the little lines in my arms were curling. The socks were very nice, and it was nice to pick them out. I really did want them. Do you still? Mom asked. Yes. Millie put so much emphasis on the word. I want you to have them too. But now that's gotten weird. Dad was comforting. I will tell you 1,000 times, it's not weird for us. You are learning. And we're learning all the stuff we haven't talked to you about. I want the socks. Those burritos, for me, love them. Would you feel better if you held on to them for our birthdays? That might not feel so stressful. Speak for yourself, Mom piped up. You only have to wait until November. No, I want to share them. Millie looked at her knuckles. That part of the purchase felt fine. It was just all the stuff that went around it. Am I spending too much? Did I forget someone? Are people going to be weird getting presents from me? Is it bad I picked out mine first? That's not bad. Picking stuff out for yourself first, Mom offered. I see things I like and then think about how much it would mean for someone else too. Can I ask, is that how we're both getting Earth socks? Millie nodded. Mom hugged her ferociously. Dad waddled back to the stove, feeling the intense part of the conversation was passing. Sometimes I do better when I have help shopping, Dad admitted. He was wrong. He had reset the intensity meter higher. Your father puts the burden on others, Stoney said, galactic contempt returning. Millie was unsure she wanted to be in the room. This time, Jules did hear all the levels to what Stoney was saying. Stoney was not just correct, but also requesting her correctness be recognized. It was Dad's turn to stare in the middle distance while talking. I ask for help, or think I ask for help. However, I don't always say the actual words to ask, so other folks take care of it for me, particularly your mother. He returned to the table and kissed his wife on the cheek. Thank you, dear. I owe you everything, including sanity. Mom leaned into the smooch with a thin smile. Don't forget it, she said. Millie put on a bored face. Through the performed disgust at her parents' affection, Millie was grinding away at a core question. She didn't want to sound like a helpless little kid. The more she thought about all this, the dumber it seemed to be making a big deal out of socks. Socks, dinnerette, theoretical propulsion. The words tumbled into one another. Her experience at the shop with the notes, the very unclear notes in the Book of Habits. Keep the dinnerette away from the theoretical propulsion section, or they would stink up the store. That's what socks meant in the shop. Keep away is the idea she came to. Should I ask to be kept away from stores or money? Millie asked. What an amazing question, Millie, Mom said. Stoney was impressed that Millie was having such an important discussion and had offered a way to solve an issue. The teen had boiled her issue down and offered a simple but logical alternative. It wasn't right, though. Having this discussion meant Millie was ready for the responsibility. I'm going to suggest something different. You're amazing for talking about difficult things. Money is a big, hard discussion that most adults can't do. You're ready for more responsibility, and keeping away doesn't help you learn. We let you take your phone to school because you have learned when it is appropriate to use it, right? Right, Millie squeaked, a little uncomfortable at the praise. The classroom doors at school had pouches for students who couldn't keep their hands off their devices for an entire period. Millie never had to use them, even though her phone was always with her, almost as close as her drawing pad. Is this going to be a guardrail thing? Are you providing me more guidance? I did almost everything we talked about. Depositing money, keeping it safe, knowing how much I spent. But the last bit has made you unhappy, Dad said. Millie made a look. Made you anxious. Sorry. The look dissolved. Mom took the conversation. This is a size thing we didn't expect would impact you the way it does. You completely ran with our prior guidance, and it worked very well for birthday checks and ball game concessions. Now we're dealing with bigger money, and we're going to move to a different gear, like riding uphill on a bicycle. What shape is this bicycle guidance going to take? Millie didn't mind the metaphor of a bike. I want my peddling, my effort, to show up as more than just my allowance. And you'll get it because you've earned it. Mom put on a reassuring look. It is all your money. How about you take the same amount you get as allowance? Not instead of allowance. I still clean the bathroom here. Millie felt the negotiation starting. Very fair question, Mom said. You get your allowance from us, plus the same amount out of your check. Then we talk through where the rest of your paycheck goes before you deposit it. It will go into the bank, and I can do all of the bank stuff with it. You can follow along as much as you'd like. So guardrails through a set amount, guardrails through watching us, and guardrails through example. Dad piped up. The guidance works for me too, Millie. I thrive in the automatic money stuff. That did sound like a reasonable compromise to Millie. She would get essentially a double allowance, then check in with Mom about how to deal with the rest as it grew with interest. The guardrails made her think of something because Dad calling them automatic. That the money would just walk in, do its work, gain some cash, and she could just go home. She thought of the story from Grandpa. Millie smiled and said aloud, Stufo. Dad's expression at hearing the word could only be described as liquid brain. Mom's expression was absolutely indecipherable, until tears came to her eyes from holding it all in, and she erupted with a loud, snorting laugh. She covered her mouth, embarrassed and laughing harder. Her husband collected himself enough to shoot an open-mouthed, wounded look at her. Mom breathed, settled, and weakly asked, What made you think of that, Millie? Silent giggles continued to make Mom shake. Millie wasn't sure what to make of such an explosion from Mom. Grandpa told me a story about the Stufo bakers today. I didn't want to hear it because it was like the 10th thing in a row that went away from what I wanted to ask, but I think the story had a bigger meaning. Which was, Mom prompted, wiping tears from her eyes. Dad maintained a gray, weak look. The Stufo bakers all set themselves up to get stuff done. They make and bake and sell in order because it's set up that way. Bakery turns into shop, then they leave. One thing at a time until they go home. One thing at a time, and they don't have to think about it at home. Mom nodded her head. That was always what I took from the story when Grandpa talked about it. I think it's a good lesson for today. Millie wasn't sure she liked ending on a lesson. That would be like 2 weeks in a row learning about habits and now Stufo guidance. It felt like the old family sitcoms that had terrible cameras and black bars on the side of the big television. Guidance and guardrails felt okay, but this was getting close to the shop. It made her think of the shop floor for some reason, the mixed tiles, Grandpa moving the furniture, moving it exactly to the corner. It made her think. Yes, Mom said, snapping Millie from the idea. We will work through putting money to work, and you can participate as much as you want, as you are ready. She studied Millie, or at least the top of Millie's head for a moment. It looked like a lot of energy had come and gone from the teen in a very short time. You look like you have more questions. Millie did, but not about money. Have you had Stufo? Is it good? It sounds like bread. Dad loudly groaned, quivered, and put his head down. Mom's laughter started again. Your father made the same assumption. Stufo is not bread. It's a high-density candle of all things that makes a super bright light. And they also use it to charge phones and seal the hulls of boats. Dad did not know that before taking a heroic bite. Mom looked over at her husband, who was sweating at the memory. He was not good for several days. Sounds like you needed better guidance, Dad. It was Dad's turn to shoot Millie a look as he turned off the stove and put away his current, now sickening, candle making. This was Millie Salmon and the Book of Habits, Chapter 3, Stocking. In the next episode, Millie and Grandpa engage in some light interstellar smuggling, as one does. Thank you for listening. You can find out more about Millie at milliesalmon.com or join us on Patreon. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever podcast app you use. Millie Salmon and the Book of Habits is a production of Infinite Shop Limited, which you can follow on all social media platforms. I'm Ray Dubicki. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading more for you soon.